Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Retail Director Group CEO Summit on the State of the Nation. My name is Anastasia Lloyd-Wallace. I am the head of the Consumer Insights Division for Retail Doctor Group. We've got a great panel of speakers this morning, and I'll pass over to Brian.
Good morning, Anastasia, and thank you very much for attending our first digital CEO breakfast. And of course, the State of the Nation, as we're calling it, and it will be part of a series. This morning, we're delighted to welcome our guests, and delighted also to have Simon Fonteyn with us. Simon heads up a partner business of ours and very much in the leasing and property update. So we're going to share with what's going on with the centres, and in particular retailers dealing with leases and the like.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? It's Simon from Leaseinfo. Obviously, I'm going to keep it brief. My session is going to concentrate on 5 areas. We're fielding a huge number of calls on retail leasing at the moment. So my area will be on what the feds have done, what the New South Wales government's done, what the Shopping Centre Council and what the ARA have done, what tenants are doing, and what landlords are doing. So I'll start with the feds. As you know, the Prime Minister announced on Sunday, the 29th of March, there's now a moratorium on eviction for non-payment of rent. That applies to all commercial and residential tenancies. Tenants and landlords should, and that's the word should, agree on rent relief. And I'll come back to what that means. There should be the ability to waive rental payments for a defined period for impacted tenants. And this is the really controversial one, the ability for tenants to terminate leases and or seek mediation or conciliation on the grounds of financial distress. Commercial property owners should pass on any benefits they receive in respect of their properties, which I'll explain in a minute. Landlords and tenants not affected by coronavirus are expected to honour their lease and rental agreements, and cost sharing or deferral of losses between landlords and tenants should be provided where one party receives a benefit. So I'll come back to some of those issues. That's what the feds have done. So the New South Wales government, I've got to be careful what I say here because I'm working with them. So most people aren't aware of this. The New South Wales government has given them unprecedented powers. They've amended something in the middle of the night called the New South Wales Government COVID-19 Legislation Amendment Emergency Measures Bill Act. So what that means effectively is they've included the ability for any lease under the Retail Leases Act, which means any shop under 1,000 square metres in a shopping centre. They have the ability now to pretty much do a nuclear option. So they can alleviate a lessee or tenant or a class of lessees or tenants from the operation of a provision of the Act, or they can remove the right of a lessor or owner of a premise or land in relation to any or all features in the Act. So at the moment, they haven't done anything with that, but they have that power. So most people aren't aware of that. So they're going to make further announcements about what they do, but they have extraordinary powers now to do things under the New South Wales Retail Leases Act. What's the Shopping Centre Council and ARA and NRA doing? Russell touched on that, and I'm sure he'll share with you. They put in a recent media release. So they've developed this voluntary retail leasing industry code of conduct, which came out yesterday. And it's really a response to the federal government's principles, which I just read out. Really, the critical one here is that they all parties are saying you need to negotiate on a case-by-case basis between landlord and tenant, and you need to provide documentary evidence of financial hardship, and that financial hardship, by the way, is not defined. So it's got to be based on documentary evidence such as reductions in foot traffic, reductions in sales. You need to be able to prove that you've actually experienced that. And then it also applies technically to March, because a lot of people have already paid their rent for March in advance. So a lot of retailers are saying, well, we've already paid that, but we've got 80% of our trade down. What do we do there? So you need to go to the landlord. Now, a lot of questions are saying, well, why would the landlord do anything? So there are now incentives for the landlord to do things, particularly smaller landlords. So what the Banking Association has done is that for any landlord or business that has debts, a loan facility up to $10 million, if you negotiate in good faith, meaning that you follow generally the principles I've just outlined, then you are entitled to defer your interest for 6 months. So you're allowed to defer on a P&I basis for 6 months. And that doesn't mean it's waived, it just means it helps with cash flow. So there is an incentive now for landlords definitely to come to the party. That's for smaller landlords. For larger landlords, they are also technically they are supposed to do this as well, because they've agreed to this voluntary code of conduct. But it's not necessarily, from what we are experiencing, universal. The other thing that the federal government has hinted at but has not yet enacted is that they're looking at accelerated tax relief. So in other words, doing a differential tax rate for landlords that provide rent relief in this period. So for example, if they were getting taxed at 30%, they might reduce it to an X%. The other thing that the federal government is working with the states, and the states are working on outgoings relief, so land tax relief, council rates, other statutory charges to reduce the cash flow, which of course should be passed on to the tenants in the form of reduced outgoings. So that's the incentive from the landlords. In terms of what are individual tenants doing, so obviously I'm speaking to a lot of tenants at the moment. There's different methods that tenants are going for. They're seeking rent reductions equal to a percentage of their lost revenue. So that's one method, or they're capping their costs based on a fixed percentage of their turnover. So they might say, okay, we'll pay you 10% of our turnover as a gross rent during this period. Others are looking to defer abate rent for a range of periods between 1 and 6 months options, with either the following methods applying: extending the lease for amount of time at the end of the lease equal to the relief granted, or proportioning the balance of abated rent over the remaining lease term or an agreed period. What are landlords doing? Apart from what I've said, some landlords have, like Vicinity, have reduced or starting to reduce their trading hours. Vicinity's announced yesterday doing 10 to 5 and cut late night trading altogether. That's for non-essential services. Essential services will operate on their own trading times as agreed upon by the landlord. So that will provide some relief. It will also allow tenants to reduce their hours. So a lot of our landlords are starting to look at those issues. Landlords are getting huge requests for abatements. So that's some of what's happening in the industry. So that the critical question, which we probably get the most, is can I terminate my lease on the grounds of financial hardship? And the answer at the moment is no, but you can't get booted out either. So at the moment, the Shopping Centre Council and the ARA are working on that issue. They both agreed that won't apply. But obviously, that's one of the principles that has been put in by the federal government. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in that space. In terms of what do we recommend, I know we have to wrap up, but so what we recommend is basically engage with your landlord. If you're a tenant, don't negotiate through the media. Engage in confidential discussions. Use facts. So use available metrics when negotiating, such as foot traffic, MAT, sales volumes, margins, and engage in regular dialogue with your landlord. You also have the right of mediation if necessary. So basically, message is communicate, communicate, and communicate. And the landlords are now receptive, so they have some inducements there to be cooperative. So I hope that helps, and I'll pass it back to Brian for any questions.
Simon, thanks very much for a fantastic summary. You know, this is such a moving feast and such a meaty topic that we're going to take the opportunity to invite you back to our next State of the Nation session, as we will our other speakers. Yes, remarkable stuff and really, really pointy end stuff. Anastasia, any questions for Simon?
Yeah, we've got quite a few questions popped up here. So firstly, can you just elaborate more on the Emergency Bill Act that you spoke about at the start? I think just a bit of clarification there.
Which one, New South Wales or federal?
New South Wales, I believe.
So you can look it up online. It's called the COVID-19 Legislation Amendment Emergency Measures Bill 2020. It's now passed both acts of Parliament, and it gives a whole range of measures available to the state government, but in particular, the one that we're focused on is what they can do with under the New South Wales Retail Leases Act. And look, what it means in essence is they can pretty much, they have the power now to modify anything within the Act. So they can even potentially prevent a landlord from charging rent. That's the nuclear option, but pretty much what they may do with it is they may prevent, say, for a landlord enforcing provisions under the right to trade. So that is that's one area. There's really they have unprecedented powers. They haven't done anything with it yet, but they now have that. They now have that power. It only lasts for. It's unclear. It only lasts for the COVID-19 emergency measures, which is still undefined, but they do have extraordinary powers. So you can look that up yourself and read it.
Right. Do you know anything about ACT? So a question or what the other states are doing, I guess, is the similar legislation online?
Well, each state government is rushing through their own amendment bills. As Russell said, leasing is a state-based issue, and each state has its own Retail Leases Act. So at the moment, I don't know exactly what they're doing in the ACT, but I would imagine that the state government is giving themselves powers to amend provisions within the Act. I would imagine that each state government would be doing it. I only know for a fact what New South Wales is doing.
Okay, great. Yes. A few more questions here. What are your views on sustainable rent levels post-corona? Do you see any sort of changes to typical lease agreements, like more cap occupancy plus deals?
So good question. The answer to that is there will be definitely changes to the way leases get structured going forward. Certain, as Brian said in his opening, certain classes of retailers are going to be more affected than others. What I would expect, there is like a transition period post this crisis where categories of retailers, including top, fashion retailers, would probably go to either some sort of percentage rent or a reduction in rent for a period. Also, all leases from now on, you can bet your bottom dollar will now have a COVID-19 force majeure clause, because the industry's been caught completely flat-footed on this area. 99.99% of leases don't contain anything to do with this. So there's going to need to be changes. Also, lease structures at the moment are basically based on turnover reporting. Given that we're going to be in a deflationary environment for sales, it'll be interesting to see how landlords deal with a MAT that's sharply falling. So to answer your question, there'll be a mixture of new deals. It'll be a gross occupancy cost deals, probably some rent reductions. I expect to see a lot of tenants in the short to medium terms remaining on holdover and going month to month with sort of reductions that way. We'll have a sector that's completely weakened on both landlord and tenant side, so there'll be a shortage of cash and capital to do things. That'll take a while to restructure. I think a lot of tenants will not agree to CPI plus anything, or even rent increases, which is the traditional structure for retail. I think that will probably change. And there'll be a lot of other changes coming in, but in the short term, that's what I predict.
Right. We've got one question here that says, what happens if your store is the strip store owned by the government, and what would you do to recommend negotiations with a government landlord?
Well, that's a good one. The government's basically already said that they're open to, the government's basically been mandated that they have to give rent relief. So you're in the box seat there. I would be going to the land, if it's a council, I'd be saying, look, go to them and get a percentage, give them your turnover, and they will be very accommodating, because that's actually legislative. They have to do that.
Right. And then I think I just got a couple of quick ones here. Then, do you have an expectation for the government, for further government financial intervention in regards to commercial and retail leases?
Well, I can't say. Well, what I expect to happen is, as I said, there will be outgoings land tax relief. There will be some form of accelerated tax benefit to landlords for providing this relief. So on top of the lost income that they're going to get, there will be some additional measures in the form of like a reduction in overall tax. That only affects a certain part of the industry. The big REITs like the Westfields, and these guys hold their properties in trusts, so they don't pay any tax themselves. They basically let the unit holders, but maybe the unit holders will receive relief, in which case that will allow the managers to pass on sort of the benefits and be able to give the same sort of after-tax benefits to their shareholders, which will allow them to be more accommodating with their tenants. So to summarise, I expect it to be in the form of tax benefits, tax relief, rather than actual cash coming back to the tenant. Although that that hasn't been ruled out as yet, but it's more around financial measures. The Treasurer has already indicated that they're expecting landlords to share the pain, which usually means that they will be expecting reductions in income rather than subsidies in cash payments for rent.
Great. Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I think maybe what I might do for you, Simon, is maybe I can send you a bullet of some of these questions that maybe we can just then answer in our follow-ups, just given we're kind of running out of time a little bit here. I think there's something obviously about what do we see if there's a lot of retail shutdowns, our high streets and things to be looking like in the future?
Well, look, I'm doing some work myself on this. You know, what are we looking at in terms of vacancies? What happened post GFC? What happened to cap rates? What's going to happen? I think that we're definitely going to see a big rise in vacancies. To quantify that is unknown, but you know, I'm anticipating vacancies in high streets, particularly fashion-exposed high streets. I'm anticipating meaningful vacancy rates in shopping centres. I'm anticipating that a large percentage of the retail sector in terms of Myer, David Jones, the DDSs, there'll be further acceleration of store closures and then what happens to that space. So there will be a lot of changes to the industry and rental structures. So we're starting to do all that work now. We're modelling it all, and you know, there'll be, the way to look at it is short-term impacts, medium-term impacts, and long-term impacts. And you know, I'll share my research when we complete it.
Great, thanks, Simon. Yeah, still got a few other questions. I think we'll maybe just take them offline and respond, just given the timing, and not everyone sort of, you know, needs to get back to their day-to-day roles. So thank you there. I think we had a couple of general questions that we'll maybe bring about now, just for the generally, if anyone in the panel wants to answer, and then we'll wrap up. If anyone else has got any general questions that they'd like to send through, you can send them through. If we don't have time for them today, we'll either answer them via our follow-up communications, or we will be hosting future events in a sort of a similar manner.
So Anastasia, if I may, we will progress, as you're touching on, with the State of the Nation very shortly for the next phase. Simon, clearly, this is one of the meatier topics. So we will invite you to, and particularly with the legislation moving quickly, we'll invite you to move into more detail in the next session, if that's possible.
Oh, no, absolutely. And congratulations, Brian and Anastasia, for putting together such an amazing topic. I mean, it's so useful. So I think everyone's very appreciative of this effort. You know, it's invaluable. So well done.
Thank you. Thank you. What we'll do is we will wrap up and pass some acknowledgements as well. But I think to Anastasia's question, you've got a couple of general questions there.
Yeah, so one was retail will be different, you know, post COVID-19. If we look to the future, what do we think the big differences that we're going to see in retail? I mean, I know this looks at a bit of future gazing, but what's your thoughts there, Brian, or any other panel members?
I think that the panel members in particular, you know, if I think about Simon and everyone's talked about, and Russell, we're going to see a different world. We will see the axis move somewhere back to the world we know, but it will be a less physical retail, which was always on the cards anyway as online grew and as retailers integrated the offer. We'll see absolute effects. One of the things that comes to my mind is that we have not seen government intervention into the economy at this level probably for 15 to 20 years. And that'll do two things. It has a much stronger hand of government in all commercial activities. And regrettably, there's probably a lot of intergenerational debt to follow. So to Simon's point, it's going to be more challenging in the medium to near future. But with that will come much more innovation, adaptation, digital fulfillment, integrated retail. But it won't surprise you to know, we still see the physical environment because we are social by instinct. This whole response to COVID globally is a de-socialization, but people will come back. Social by instinct will want that tactile experience, with all the pecuniary channels to flow from that. So, in fact, on LinkedIn, I do write about the future of retail, and my views haven't changed dramatically even through this COVID piece.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, Brian. I think, to be honest, there's always a place for physical, even though I'm obviously an online guy. I do see physical always having a place. It's more understanding now. You know, like this has fast-tracked that transition into understanding where physical and digital actually fit together, and how the changing nature of commerce is happening. I think, from my perspective, it's more so now about understanding your product and how customers want to shop your product, and knowing what each channel plays in terms of purpose in that chain or in that experience network. I think that's going to become more and more important.
Can I just make two quick comments on that? One is, I think it's just so important for those that are going to win in the new era to be good at online. So it's not just going online, it's being really good at it. It's understanding it, do your homework. It's just like you'd understand, you know, your customers will walk through your store every day. You have to understand that. And the other is, I think there's a real opportunity in sort of hybrid kind of online and bricks and mortar models where, you know, you've got your kind of tactile, physical product, but you do a lot of stuff really cleverly in terms of logistics, in terms of payment, in terms of online ordering and delivery, etc., and appealing to a different demographic market beyond just your catchment of your retail store. There's going to be lots of real estate opportunities that you could take advantage in an innovative way.
Yeah, it's keeping that fluidity between physical shopping experience and online shopping experience. And I think that ties back to what you're saying, Alan, in terms of doing online well. And I think that's going to be the big difference, is people are going to invest more time into that, more resources into understanding how they can do that better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the voice of the customer now is that, you know, customers are, for the last 12 months, really been moving towards make my life easier, save me time, and then now realizing that this can be done, delivery services, online services. So I think we will see much more sort of customer demand now for this convenience offering.
Yeah, and like one of the topics that we've been talking about a lot, Anastasia, with you guys, is obviously the cross-platform, cross-channel loyalty programs. One of the really big topics going around, and enabling that. So I think, yeah, it's just going to become more and more apparent.
I think there's going to be a fundamental change in the supply of retail real estate. The market's already oversupplied pre-COVID. There's going to be a structural change in the supply of real estate for retail. There will be repurposing of retail. This is a trend that's happening all over the world. If you look at the US and the UK to some extent, although UK's got less retail per capita than we do. So basically, there's going to be changes in the shopping centre model. They're going to probably withdraw space. They'll repurpose space. Some retail shopping centres will need to be converted. Other parts of the shopping centres will need to be either changed to some more online fulfillment strategies, different types of uses. So there's going to be some very fundamental changes in the way the supply side works.
I agree with that. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start now to wrap up the first State of the Nation. As Anastasia says, any other questions, please, we will deal with that offline with the people raising questions and come back to you individually so that everyone gets their questions answered. Anastasia, are you okay if I move into wrapping up?
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think one thing from me would be, really interested to know from retailers, what insights you actually are looking for during this time. What do you want to know? We're conducting a lot of internal research within Retail Doctor Group to share with our community. So what do you want to know about your customers? What insights are you looking for during this time to really help you with your future planning, strategic direction?
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Firstly, to our panelists and our partners in business, just a great appreciation to each of you for your expertise. It's considerable. And this is all part of the We're in This Together campaign, which is really about helping our retail community. So to each and every one of you, huge round of applause and thank you, virtual applause. Russell Zimmerman opened up. Russell is the outgoing Executive Director for the Australian Retailers Association. I've never met anyone who's worked harder for our industry and done a wonderful job. So in his absence, I just wanted to pass those kudos on. Thank you also to Anastasia, who's put this together in the background. It's probably not quite as much as the physical CEO breakfast in putting it together, but it's not far off, particularly with the technical, and we're learning through the technical aspects of it as well. So we're delighted. We have recorded this webinar. We'll be distributing to whoever would like to listen to it, podcast. And I also wanted to acknowledge that we've sent an invitation out to Dominic Lamb, who's accepted as the head of the NRA. So very keen for her to be in State of the Nation Part 2. There's clearly great content that you each can continue to contribute. So on that note, we are delighted to have hosted this morning and want to thank each and every one of you. And thanks very much for everyone who attended today. And by the way, if you need any particular advice, information, anything we can assist you with, copies of this recording, any of the content that the panelists have offered to provide, contact Brian at retaildoctor.com.au or Anastasia at retaildoctor.com.au or visit our LinkedIn sites. Thanks very much. Stay tuned for State of the Nation Part 2.